War never changes. In 1945, my great-great-grandfather, serving in the army, wondered if he could go back home to his wife and his son that he'd never seen. He got his wish when the US ended World War II by dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world waited for nuclear Armageddon. Instead, something miraculous happened. We began to harness nuclear energy, not as a weapon, but as a limitless source of energy. This led to the discovery of nuclear-powered microscopes that enabled us to see the microscopic living organisms capable of life and destruction, termed as bacteria. This advanced the potency of human life as well as a new mechanism of war, such as the biological warfare. One certain bacteria proved to be the deadliest of all. Neisseria meningitidis was discovered. As this new type of war began to unfold, I watched my mother take on the front lines. Unlike the soldiers who served before her, a line of men who fought with gunpowder, my mom was armed with science and research.
You ready, sweetie? The same story? Okay. Once upon a time, long ago in the old world, the largest burden of meningococcal disease occurred in an area of sub-Saharan Africa, known as the meningitis belt. From Senegal in the west to Ethiopia in the east, this belt stretched across 26 countries. Now, the Neisseria meningitidis only infected humans. It's transmitted from person to person through little droplets of respiratory or throat secretions from carriers. Things like kissing or close and prolonged contact transmits the disease. The bacteria can be carried in the throat and sometimes overwhelms the body's defenses, allowing the bacteria to spread through the bloodstream and then to the brain. The end. Good night, sweetie.
Things suddenly changed in the 21st century. Years of consumption led to shortages of every major natural resources. The entire world unraveled. Peace became a distant memory. Scientists all over the world from different countries developed different biological weaponry to secure the natural resources. The deadliest bacteria known to man, Neisseria meningitidis, was weaponized. In the year 2077, the world stood on the brink of total biological warfare. Then, the unthinkable happened. The world unleashed nuclear biological Armageddon. Strains of Neisseria meningitidis was fitted upon the rockets, serving as the new atomic bombs, capable of traveling halfway across the world. Those that survived the nuclear biological warfare stayed in the so-called underground vaults.
So, what have you established there in the facility?
Well, the average incubation period is 4 days, but can range between 2 and 10 days. And the most common symptoms are a stiff neck, high fever, sensitivity to light, confusion, headaches, and vomiting. Now, with the fatality risk approaching 15% within 12 hours of infection, it is crucial to initiate testing as quickly as possible, but not to wait for the results before initiating antibiotic therapy. Have you figured out the best specimen for diagnosis?
Yes, well, we take a small amount of cerebrospinal fluid to the laboratory as soon as possible for analysis. The diagnosis is suspected when gram-negative diplococci are seen on gram stain of a centrifuge sample of CSF. Sometimes they are located inside the white blood cells. The microscopic identification takes around 1 to 2 hours after specimen arrival in the laboratory. While the gold standard of diagnosis is microbiological isolation of N. meningitidis by growth from a sterile body fluid, which could be a CSF or blood. Diagnosis is confirmed when the organism has grown, most often on a chocolate agar plate but also on Thayer Martin agar. Did you get my papers on differentiation?
Yes. To differentiate any bacterial growth from other species, a small amount of bacterial colony is tested for oxidase, catalase for which all clinically relevant Neisseria show a positive reaction, and the carbohydrates maltose, sucrose, and glucose, in which Neisseria meningitidis will ferment glucose and maltose. Then, after all that, we let serology determine the subgroup of the Neisseria meningitidis and then send it over to epidemiology for surveillance purposes.
It'll take a minimum of 48 to 72 hours turnaround time, right? For growing the organism? Yes, and up to a week more for serotyping. Well, we've seen that growth can and often fail though, either because the antibiotics have been given preemptively or because the specimens have been inappropriately transported. Well, this organism is extremely susceptible to antibiotics and fastidious in its temperature, carbon dioxide, and growth medium requirements.
That's a good point. Oh, and I also found this paper about PCR in industrialized countries. It said polymerase chain reaction tests have been increasingly used since it can rapidly identify the organism and works even after antibiotics have been given. But yes, thank you. I'll call you again soon.
They stayed in these underground vaults for decades, researching and tirelessly working for a cure against Neisseria meningitidis.
I need that cure, Tom. Give me the cure, damn it! Well, what do you have for me?
Good morning, sir. We've gathered that meningitis caused by Neisseria meningitidis is often difficult to distinguish from other types. Hence, an initial empirical therapy using an antibiotic with effective central nervous system penetration should be done until the etiology is established. This may be done through the administration of antibiotics such as dexamethasone, a third-generation cephalosporin, or vancomycin. When an accurate diagnosis of meningococcal meningitis is established, changes can be made. A third-generation cephalosporin, either ceftriaxone or cefotaxime, is the drug of choice as treatment. However, antibiotics like penicillin G, ampicillin, chloramphenicol, fluoroquinolone, and aztreonam are also alternative therapies. Moreover, surgical interventions may be necessary to manage complications such as subdural effusions, empyema, and hydrocephalus.
In the year 2178, exactly 50 years ago, since the nuclear biological Armageddon, I inherited the same role as my mother, to be of service to my country and to the generations of families who have lived underground. By continuing my mother's research, I was able to discover prevention for rehabilitation, and after years of extensive research, a cure. Vaccination is the best defense against meningococcal disease. Most children receive the meningococcal conjugate vaccine routinely. The first dose is at 11 years old or 12 years old, then a booster shot is to be given 5 years later. Meningococcal polysaccharide vaccine can be given to people older than 55 years old. Young people ages 16 to 21 are considered most at risk for contracting meningitis. There are 3 types of vaccines available. The polysaccharide vaccines are used during a response to outbreaks, mainly in Africa. Conjugate vaccines are also in prevention and outbreak response, which confer longer-lasting immunity. Protein-based vaccines against Neisseria meningitidis B, it has been introduced into the routine immunization schedule and used in an outbreak response. Chemoprophylaxis. Antibiotic prophylaxis for close contacts, when given promptly, decreases the risk of transmission. Ciprofloxacin antibiotic is the antibiotic of choice, and ceftriaxone as alternative. After finding a cure, we are now ready to head out. Simultaneous vaults all around the world opened into the unknown and barren wasteland. Now, a new war has emerged, The war for rehabilitation, reclaiming what was lost. Because if there's one thing that history has taught me, it's that war never changes.